Hello everyone, this is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. It is January 2019. In this episode we're going to take a brief look at some very interesting photographs that show a meeting between the Palestinian Grand Mufti Haj Amin al-Husseini and some of the elite of the Nazi SS, including Hitler himself. These photographs are considered extraordinarily scandalous. They've actually even gotten Netanyahu himself into a little bit of trouble because he made a claim that was actually not really backed up by any evidence related to these photographs and the meetings that actually did take place. However, the most important thing about this is that it does prove a connection between Nazi Germany and the Italian fascists directly with some of these Arab leaders and the Islamic elite in the past. Now, the aspect of this that basically drew Netanyahu into the firing range of controversy was he basically suggested that the Grand Mufti was responsible for the idea of the final solution. And this was because the Mufti did not want Jews to have a homeland established inside of this Palestinian and Israeli region. Now, the problem for this, though, is that Hitler and some of the SS elite actually still believed in this idea that maybe they would basically deport or export many of the Jews and send them to this homeland rather than going through with the full mode of execution and Holocaust and all of that. However, this picture has been complicated a bit because other researchers and historians have found that basically what they believe is that this Mufti, who sometimes has been referred to as Hitler's henchman, basically made it impossible for Jews to return to basically to have an escape route to Palestine, and that by him doing so, it made the final solution an inevitability, something that could not be avoided. That he knew that indeed this is what Hitler was planning to do or would eventually do. Now, information that actually makes it even worse for the Grand Mufti is that other historians have found information that suggests he actually knew about the Holocaust and knew about it taking place related to meetings that he had had with Heinrich Himmler going back to 1943. His first meeting with Hitler was in 1941, by the way. But it says here, according to Gilbert Akar, quote, "The Mufti was well aware that the European Jews were being wiped out. He never claimed the contrary, nor, unlike some of his present-day admirers, did he play the ignoble, perverse, and stupid game of Holocaust denial. His amour propre would not allow him to justify himself to the Jews. Gloating that the Jews had paid a much higher price than the Germans, he cites, quote, their losses in the Second World War represent more than 30% of the total number of their people. Statements like this from a man who was well placed to know what the Nazis had done constitute a powerful argument against Holocaust deniers. Husseini reports that the Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler told him in the summer of 1943 that the Germans had, quote, already exterminated more than 3 million Jews. Quote, I was astonished by this figure, as I had known nothing about the matter until then. Thus, in 1943, Husseini knew about the genocide. And Husseini, there's a reference to the Grand Mufti. And it goes a bit further here as it continues in the memoir. It says, Himmler asked me on the occasion, how do you propose to settle the Jewish question in your country? I replied, all we want from them is that they return to their countries of origin. He, referring to Himmler, replied, we shall never authorize their return to Germany. And adding more to that, the Mufti said in November of 1943, quote, it is the duty of Mohammedans, by which is meant the Muslims, in general and Arabs in particular, to drive all Jews from Arab and Mohammedan countries. Germany is also struggling against the common foe who oppressed Arabs and Mohammedans in their different countries. It has very clearly recognized the Jews for what they are and resolved to find a definitive solution for the Jewish danger that will eliminate the scourge that Jews represent in the world. Now, those are rather damning comments, I would say. And this was actually even backed up during the Nuremberg trials, where one of Adolf Eichmann's deputies, known as Dieter Walsini, said that the Grand Mufti knew about the extermination of European Jews and that he encouraged it to continue. However, I hasten to add here that many other historians have basically been dismissive of the Mufti's role in this, saying that, even if he did say anything like this, it basically carried no weight anyway. It's not like he would be a person who they would actually listen to and, take policy advice from. It's because essentially, since this path was already set, he could have said anything either way, and it would have made no impact or no difference at all. But I would say that ethically and morally, he's basically in a problematic area, since he did seem at least tangentially to have some involvement here, especially considering that he repeatedly blocked any entry of Jewish refugees who came from Europe. And he repeatedly and publicly demanded that no Jews ever be allowed in the Middle East, specifically none into Palestine or the Palestinian region. He really didn't care if they went somewhere else, so long as they didn't come there. But he also didn't seem to care what was happening to them in Germany. In fact, we have even more information beyond just his contacts with the Nazis and the SS. In June of 1943, the Mufti recommended to the Hungarian minister that it would be better to send Jews in Hungary to concentration camps in Poland rather than to allow them to find asylum in the Palestinian region. He said, "I ask your excellency to permit me to draw your attention to the necessity of preventing Jews from leaving your country for Palestine, and if there are reasons which make their removal necessary, it would be indispensable and infinitely preferable to send them to other countries where they would find themselves under active control. For example, in Poland." Of course, active control means in the concentration camps, thus avoiding danger and preventing damage. And of course, he means damage to his precious lands of Palestine or the Palestinian region. Because these, 900 Jewish children, by the way, this is what he was, opposing, would definitely be such a danger, I'm so sure. And we find repeated instances of this same thing where he blocked these things over and over. And this, related to children. But he said that shows here, in September of 1943, intense negotiations to rescue 500 Jewish children from the Arb concentration camp collapsed due to the objections of the Grand Mufti al-Husseini, who blocked the children's departure to Turkey because he had fears that they would somehow end up in Palestine. And really, it's my view, too, that these connections don't simply end way back in the 1940s, because there's evidence that you can find today of pictures and videos showing the military in Iran, for instance, doing the old Roman-style salute that was used by the Nazis. And I think that goes back to these connections during this World War II period. Next, we'll take a look at an article from Haaretz from 2017 titled "Never Before Seen Photos of Palestinian Mufti with Hitler Ties Visiting His Visits to Nazi Germany." 6 photographs have emerged of Haj Amin al-Husseini visiting Nazi Germany, and they're for sale at an auction block. And during these meetings, it was Himmler himself who wished the Grand Mufti to have success in his fight, quote, "against the Jewish invaders." The article says on page 3 of my printed off version, I will link it below so you can check it out yourself. It says, 2 months ago, the National Library of Israel made its own contribution to raising awareness about these connections between the Nazis and the Grand Mufti when it published a telegram to Husseini from Heinrich Himmler, in which the SS chief wished him success in his battle against the Jewish invaders. The 6 photos that Kadem is now offering up for sale show Husseini, quote, during a tour apparently held at a camp, obviously a concentration camp, in Nazi Germany circa 1943. The auction house's website says. The photos, 3 of which are on the site, show Husseini with several senior Nazi officials in uniform as well as government staffers in civilian dress. And in relation to this, the next thing we'll look at is an article in Time magazine from David Kaiser, October 22nd, 2015, titled "What Hitler and the Grand Mufti Really Said." I'll skip down to page 2 of this, where it says here, al-Husseini began the conversation by declaring that the Germans and the Arabs had the same enemies, the English, the Jews, and the Communists. He proposed an Arab revolt all across the Middle East to fight the Jews, the English, who still ruled Palestine and controlled Iraq and Egypt, and even the French, who controlled Syria and Lebanon. He also wanted to form an Arab legion using Arab prisoners from the French Empire who were POWs inside Germany, and he also asked Hitler to declare publicly, as the German government had done so privately, that it favored, quote, the elimination of the Jewish national home in Palestine. Then the article goes on to reference Netanyahu and his comments. Netanyahu uttered a half-truth when he referred to Hitler's supposed desire to expel rather than murder the Jews. That had indeed been the policy of the German government, at least until 1938, but as we all know, things changed rather drastically after that. And really, the basic boil down of all this, what it comes down to is that although the Mufti may not have been involved in basically originating an idea for something that was actually taking place already prior to these meetings, he certainly was not a person who was very much opposed to it. So he has some rather severe ethical and moral challenges there. And anyone who supports him today or supports organizations that have a similar mindset to him are people maybe that you really don't want to associate with. And these connections between the Arab world and the Nazis run deeper, far, far deeper than just this. And I'll link some additional material below so that you can check that out. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.